When you ask people to name a male R&B group from the 1990s, you'll get different responses. Jodeci, Boyz II Men, Dru Hill, Blackstreet, 112, Jagged Edge. People who are really into music might even hit you with the group's solo. Very few people would name the group Intro. Intro was an acronym that stood for Innovative New Talent Reaching Out, and the group was a trio that consisted of lead singer Kenny Greene, Buddy Wike, and Jeff Sanders. The group made their mark with their self-titled debut album, which featured smooth R&B vocals over hip-hop beats. The group won fans with songs like Come Inside, Love Thang, and Let Me Be the One. But after releasing a second album, the group literally disappeared. What happened to them? Why was there never a third album from the group? What was lead singer Kenny Greene's secret that some people speculate had something to do with the group's disappearance? And what secret did Buddy Wike later have that he hid in plain sight for nearly 2 decades? Watch this video to find out the answers to all these things. Buddy Wike met Nelson Brown when they were both in the Army stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Initially, Buddy and Nelson had a group called the Bum Rush Posse, and Buddy was producing hip-hop music. At the same time, Buddy had a friend that he thought Buddy should meet. He then introduced Buddy to this dude named Kenny Greene, who was also in the Army. After the meeting, Buddy and Kenny started hanging out at the recreation center on post. Buddy played the piano, and Kenny would be writing songs. Then they started entering local talent shows. At one club, called Larry's La Shaka Lounge, they kept losing to the same girl every Wednesday. The winner of the contest got a trophy, but most importantly, he got $100 too. After a while, the guys began to suspect that it was an inside job. How come the same girl kept winning every week? At this point in time, outside of trying to win talent contests, the guys were just making music for fun. When Kenny and Buddy were on leave from the military, they'd drive up to New York and record in a friend's studio that he had at his house. One day, a woman named Tammy Lucas heard them, and she was impressed with the way they sang, and she told them that they should be performing professionally. As a result, she introduced them to a man named Ed Goldsman, who was the owner of a record label called Classified Records. Goldsman was a house music producer, and that was the kind of music he wanted Intro to make. He released their music in his native country of Russia, and some of it was played in North Carolina simply because that's where the guys were stationed at the time. Of course, Intro wasn't interested in doing house music. They wanted to do R&B music. So they kept talking to Goldsman, and then eventually they convinced him to let them do some R&B music. The outcome of that was Buddy got to produce 2 songs, Good Love and Love Is Here. Meanwhile, because of Desert Storm, Buddy got deployed to Saudi Arabia, and as a result, he and Kenny lost touch. When Buddy came back to the States after his deployment was over, he found out that Kenny had gotten out of the military and left North Carolina. Trying to find him, Buddy drove around different areas on post and in the city and would just ask random people if they knew Kenny, a dude that could sing real good and was about yay tall. One day, he ran into a guy that had all the right answers to Buddy's questions. Yes, he did know a dude named Kenny who could sing real good, and yeah, he was yay tall too. In fact, he lived right next to where they were at that moment. Excitedly, Buddy went and knocked on the door that the guy had pointed out. Then, Kenny, who could sing real good, answered the door. But unfortunately, it wasn't the right Kenny, wasn't Kenny Greene. While looking for Greene, Buddy's friend Peekaboo said he knew a dude named Trap who could sing, so he introduced Buddy to Trap. Jeff Sanders was his government name. Jeff was a member of a hip-hop dance crew called the Oreo Dancers. Buddy asked Jeff to join the group, so now Intro had 3 members, Buddy, Nelson, and Jeff. The trio then went to see Ed Goldsman about recording some new music. However, without Kenny, Goldsman wasn't interested in the group. He told them if they could get Kenny back in the group, they might be able to work together again. Dismayed, thinking that his music dreams were over, Buddy drove back to North Carolina. When he got home, the caller ID on his phone showed a call from area code 313, which was the Detroit, Michigan area. Not thinking much of it at the time, he decided to call the number back in the morning. When he did, he was shocked and pleasantly surprised to find out it was Kenny Greene. He'd finally found him, or I guess Kenny had found him. Anyway, now that Kenny was back, the group visited Goldsman again, and true to his word, Goldsman was ready to work with Intro once again. However, the group was now a foursome, but that wouldn't last for very long, because at that point, Nelson decided to leave the group and focus on his military career. So Intro now consisted of Buddy, Jeff, and Kenny now that he was back. One day, Buddy, Kenny, and Jeff went to a club called the Red Zone. While they were there, in the VIP section, they ran into Heavy D and Andre Harrell. They asked Heavy D if they could audition for him. To get away from the music that was playing, they wanted to go in the bathroom so he could hear them clearly. However, Heavy refused, and he told them to audition right there in the middle of the club. Confused, but wanting to get on, they did it, and apparently Heavy liked what he heard because he asked them for their number. After a short amount of time had passed, Jeff called his mother one day and asked if anyone had called for him. She told him that some man had called for him. Hefty's B, something like that. Confused at first, Jeff finally figured out that she meant Heavy D. That's it, his mom said when she heard Jeff say the name. When the group called Heavy back, he told them that they needed to come back up to New York. Why? Because his dude, Eddie F., had a production company and he was looking for a male group. As a result, Heavy thought that they should meet with Eddie. Since Heavy's label, Uptown, already had Jodeci on the roster, Heavy wasn't trying to get them to sign there. The next day, Intro went up to New York, straight to Eddie F's office. As soon as they got there, though, Eddie asked them to help move some office furniture. This wasn't just a short-term thing. This went on for hours, until about 11 o'clock that night. Finally, at that point, Eddie asked them to sing for him. They sang some original material for him, and it caught his attention. But there was a problem that the group had to deal with. How could they sign with Eddie F. when they were already under contract with Ed Goldsman and Classified Records? Oh boy, they didn't want to tell Eddie that they were already under contract because they felt that would have ended the meeting with him right there. The trio devised a plan to have Kenny pretend to be a crackhead in order to get out of their contract with Goldsman. This is how it went down. To make it look authentic, Jeff put some dirt on Kenny's shirt to make it look like he'd been living like a crackhead. The group then went to see Goldsman. They told him that due to Kenny's drug issues and some other stuff that was going on, the group was divided and no longer working together. Believe it or not, Goldsman bought their story. He was disappointed though because he thought the group really had something. Nonetheless, he agreed to let them out of their contract and sign the paperwork releasing them from their deal. That opened the door for them to be able to sign a contract with Eddie F., and they signed a production deal with him and the Untouchable. Eddie also told them that he would get them a deal with a major label. Within a few days of this, the group was already in the studio working with R&B singer Jeff Redd on his You Called and Told Me remix. Next, they worked with Shinehead on his song Try My Love. Meanwhile, working to get the group a deal with a major label, just like he promised, one Friday evening, Eddie F. invited presidents from all of the top record labels to his house for dinner. The entire time that they were there, all Eddie played were intro songs. People kept saying, "Who is that? What are we listening to?" And they was feeling the music. Beginning that following Monday, Eddie began getting calls from all types of different labels. And within a few days, he got an Intro record deal with Atlantic Records. While Intro was working on material for their first album, Diddy and Andre Harrell stopped by every day, while Heavy D would come through occasionally to see what was up. One day, in between recording sessions, Buddy saw a young woman sitting on the couch crying. He went to her and he asked her what was wrong. Her response, "N-words ain't ish. N-words ain't ish." The woman he was talking to was Mary J. Blige, and she was already going through stuff. And that's what Buddy stumbled into. But eventually, Intro would begin working with Mary. Before they ever released any of their own music, Intro wrote 4 songs for Mary's debut album: Love No Limit, My Love, Reminisce, and Let Me Be the One. However, there wasn't room for Let Me Be the One on the album because Mary only had 3 slots left to fill. Intro also co-wrote You Don't Have to Worry, which appeared on the Who's the Man motion picture soundtrack. Additionally, Intro was friendly with the female group SWV, and the two groups often hung out together in Jeff's basement. Buddy was dating Coco, SWV's lead singer, at the time. In fact, Coco says that the song I'm So Into You from SWV's debut album was about Buddy. In the video for the song, in one scene, Coco is wearing a hat that says Bud on it, which she says was referencing Buddy. However, despite that, Coco told Buddy that when she got a #1 hit, she was leaving him. He laughed it off, but eventually the SWV single Weak was released, and it went #1. True to her word, Coco broke up with Buddy. We're going to take a time out from our story to ask you to like, subscribe, share, comment, hit that notification bell, and repeat when it comes to our videos. Now, back to our story. Getting back to Intro's music, they picked the songs for their debut album while sitting on Eddie F's back porch and smoking weed with reggae artist Super Cat. Cat was the one that mostly picked the songs for their album, as well as the order that they appeared on the album. Intro's debut album was released in March of 1993. Titled Intro, the album went number 11 R&B while also going gold. The songs Love Thang, Let Me Be the One, and Come Inside were released as singles. The album also contained a cover of the Stevie Wonder song Ribbon in the Sky. The song was very popular and was one of those rare covers that was just as good as the original song. Well, maybe not that good, but people loved the song. You get the picture. There was another thing about the song that got the group excited. Stevie Wonder loved it. Stevie says that when he first heard the song, he was like, "Who is that guy doing my song?" Initially, Stevie reflected that he was like, But then he was like, Then, yeah. Stevie further connected with the group when he found out that Kenny was from Detroit, just like Stevie himself was. There's no better testimony to how good your remake was than to have it blessed by the original artist. Unfortunately, even at this early moment in their careers, seeds of dissension were already being sown around Intro. For whatever reason, studio time was being booked for the group, but not all the members were aware of it. Sometimes, guys wouldn't find out that a session was going on until it was already underway, or sometimes they wouldn't find out until it was already over. Additionally, the group felt that the Untouchables weren't doing right by them regarding that money. They felt that they should have been better off money-wise, and that Atlantic had provided the Untouchables with plenty of money for Intro's project. However, the group wasn't seeing that cash. Because of this, among other things, Intro left the Untouchables and signed directly to Atlantic Records. However, things didn't change for the better for Intro because of that move. For their second album, everything was changed from their debut album. First, the group's production was changed as the Untouchables were out. The A&R also changed as Kevin Woodley left the label and was replaced by Brian Reed, L.A. Reid's brother. According to Buddy, Reed focused all of his attention on the sister singing group, the Braxtons, and he didn't really spend any time working with Intro. Why did he do this? According to Buddy, it was because Reed was dating Toni Braxton at the time. Another thing happened as soon as Intro got their budget for the second album. Kenny Greene's father passed away. On the group's second album, Kenny was working on it when Buddy and Jeff weren't even aware he was doing it. At a meeting that the group had at Atlantic Records, they got into an exchange of words and additions began to grow within the group. Because of his father's passing, basically the second album, which was titled New Life and released in 1995, was an album that honored Kenny's father. This explains why the album had a gospel feel to it, and unfortunately the album was not nearly as successful as its predecessor. Not long after the group finished their second album, Intro's lawyer told them that Atlantic Records wanted to drop them. According to Buddy, there was a falling out between Intro's manager and Atlantic Records, or there was a falling out between Kenny and somebody at the label, but whatever the case was, Atlantic released Intro from their contract. After the group returned from their tour for the second album, they decided to take a break while they got some issues ironed out. What was supposed to be a short break caused the guys to drift even further apart. As a result, the short break turned into a 2 to 3 year separation. It would take a clothing line to bring the guys back together. Fubu, which was a hot brand at the time, was putting together a compilation album of music. They wanted some tracks from Intro to put on the album. Intro agreed to do it and came back together to record the songs. After they recorded a couple of songs for Fubu, the group kept going and ultimately recorded about 20 tracks that could make up a third album for the group. Around this time is when Kenny told Buddy and Jeff that he was HIV positive. And he also told them that he was bisexual. At the time, Kenny had people in the industry that already knew his secret and were threatening to reveal it publicly. So he revealed his truth to his family and to his group before they heard it from somewhere else. In truth, though, during the recording of their second album, Buddy already knew Kenny was sick, but he didn't say anything to him about it. At this point, Kenny began having various illnesses, such as pneumonia. He also asked his mother, Frances, to take him to the hospital. She did as he asked her, but she didn't know why she was taking him to the hospital, at least not until they got home and she saw the pamphlets that talked about living with someone who's HIV positive. The disease had also began affecting Kenny's mind and had him behaving strangely. He would wear overcoats when it was summertime, and he would randomly start arguments with his sister Shanti for no reason at all. That wasn't the way they normally interacted with each other because they always got along and they didn't argue like that. Kenny began to get so sick that his mother quit her job in order to be able to take care of him. Not long after that, Kenny was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS. At that point, Kenny was put in the hospital, and it seemed like they just left him there to die. They didn't really do anything for him. They made it saying there was nothing that could be done. But to try to get him some better care, a friend connected Kenny with a woman named Maria Davis, who was an AIDS activist. She was able to get Kenny into a better hospital and also to see her physician. When Kenny was hospitalized, Jeff was afraid to go see him. He felt that Kenny just didn't look like himself. However, Kenny had lived with Jeff and his mother prior to them signing their record deal. Since she had developed a relationship with Kenny as well, Jeff's mother went to see him and took Jeff with her. After that, it would be another month before Jeff made his second visit. At that point, Kenny was sedated and could barely talk. After that visit, Jeff couldn't bring himself to go see Kenny again. Honestly, he was afraid to go, and he was in shock about everything that had happened to Kenny. Meanwhile, Buddy would visit Kenny at minimum 2 to 3 times a week just to check on him and see how he was doing. Unfortunately, Kenny continued to get sicker. Eventually, he had fluid on his lungs, and the doctors posed the question, "Do you want us to operate, or do you want to pull the plug?" With Kenny's mother in Florida, the only person who could make the decision was Maria Davis. She went to Kenny's bedside, held his hand, and told him that if he wanted them to operate, to tell her. Otherwise, if he wanted her to have them pull the plug, blink his eyes or something. Instead, Kenny squeezed her hand. Davis then told the doctors not to operate and to unplug Kenny from everything. Kenny Greene passed away on October the 1st, 2001. He was only 32 years old. With Kenny gone, it would be about 2 years before Buddy and Jeff even spoke to each other. They would be brought back together by an unlikely person, 50 Cent. 50 had flipped one of the group's songs, Funny How Time Flies. As a result, he invited Buddy and Jeff to come out to perform the song with him. After Kenny passed, in the back of his mind, Buddy thought that the group might be done. However, he and Jeff tried to add new members several different times to keep the group going. Unfortunately, none of the additions worked out. In 2004, about 3 years after Kenny died, out of necessity, Buddy became a New York City policeman, and he was one for 17 years before he retired. When he first became a cop, the phone wasn't ringing in relation to doing music or anything related to intro, and the man had to feed his family. His sister, who was already a detective, convinced him to take the job. More recently, in 2024, Buddy was diagnosed with prostate cancer. However, he says he was ready for it, as the disease runs in his family. Buddy had been getting annual physicals and watching his PSA levels. Buddy received his last treatment for the disease later that same year. Currently in 2025, Intro has reformed, with Teo Soprano joining the group to serve as their new lead singer. While Intro made an impact on the R&B genre with their music when they first came out, they also did the same with their songwriting. Honoring the songs that he wrote for Mary J. Blige, in 1994, Kenny Greene was named Songwriter of the Year by ASCAP. Greene also worked with other artists such as Will Smith, AZ, Cameron, Tyrese, and 98 Degrees. Even though the group's time in the spotlight was short, people that know Intro's music still enjoy and listen to it to this day. Thank you all for checking out our video, and we appreciate you spending time with us. We have other videos that are great too, though, if I may say so myself, so please check those out as well. Thanks again, and see you soon.